just put the recorded computer. Um, okay, I'll get into character. No.
Yeah, I know exactly.
All right. Hello, Lee. Welcome. Thanks for coming in today.
Hi,
Uh,
Chris. Thank you for having me.
it's great to have you, man. Let's see, a little context. Lee and I met each other while I was interning at a toy company. I was a graphic design intern, and he was on the video team. Absolute rock star of a producer. Um, but I will let you tell them who you are and whatever you want to share about yourself, Lee.
Sure. Yeah, and I have fond memories of us meeting there, and you were not only a great intern, but we've become friends, so I
Thanks.
appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, I guess my summary background, I initially came out of college with an audio production degree. Quickly realized that while I loved music and playing music, I did not want to spend the rest of my life, working life, in studios and um, recording other musicians. It was a passion hobby and wasn't really what I wanted to do for the rest of my career. So after working in the Boston area for 5 years, a little more than 5 years, uh, I decided to go back to school to SCAD, which I think we also went
Yeah.
to,
Yep.
not at the same time, but we're both alum there. So I went for motion media design, motion graphic design, as it's often called too. That was a wonderful experience. I will say personally, like I was much more serious about school. I was not playing around. I had the best time learning from those particular. Oops, sorry, hold on.
Oh, you're good. You're good.
I have to stop my notification. Sorry, you might have to edit that
No, you're fine. Yeah, totally can.
in. Yeah, I had the best time at SCAD, learning from those professors. They really know their stuff. And it was amazing to watch your last episode with Joseph. Although he wasn't one of my professors through graphic design there, he was really insightful. So I appreciate you having him as a guest.
Of course.
Coming out of that, that's where I ended up at Hexbug, the toy company. So that's where you and I ended up meeting.
Yep.
I guess, when I left Hexbug, I moved on to America's Test Kitchen. I wanted to relocate out of the Texas area where they were based back to where I grew up in New England, Massachusetts. And at that point, I was, heavily involved in a lot of video production, motion design. Since it was a small team at Hexbug, I was acting a lot like a producer. So that really set me up for success in getting in with America's Test Kitchen, which was a wonderful company, great experience. But unfortunately, I was laid off there, as a number of people have been. I was really sad to hear just the other week that a whole another group of people were let go. So I've reached out to some of them.
From the same company.
Oh, yeah, at the same company. I guess I would say at this point there's been three pretty significant rounds, but um, yeah, so that's a whole other discussion.
Yeah.
Again, wonderful company. I still love it. um, and really enjoyed my time there. So when I first started, I was on the kids division. They've sunset that division, but that was a really great experience working on their YouTube channel content and building up those teams before they dissolved, and then moving into some of the other work.
Yeah.
So yeah, at this point, I've been doing some freelance work. Um, with an agency in Boston and with a friend of mine who has a production company in the area as well. I've since put that on a bit of a hiatus for a few different reasons, but yeah, still really excited and eager to get back into producing, directing, creative management, since that's sort of my background.
Yeah. So if you need a producer or creative director or anything, that's Lee. Lee is your man. He's very talented. Um, yeah, I remember the content that you were producing, and we just talked a little bit about this anyway off camera, but the stuff that you produced at Hexbug, I always loved it. You had great characters, original characters that you would add to the videos, and it made for great content from Hexbug, I felt like. So
Yeah,
uh,
thank you.
yeah,
That's actually probably what helped me. So yeah, all of these stepping stones, I don't want to make them seem insignificant. These
sure.
are parts of my career that I put a lot of effort into with really great collaborators. So certainly not just me. A lot of people put a lot of hard work into making all this content. But I think that resonated in that kids from that kid space, with the EP who decided to hire me at America's Test Kitchen. They're no longer there either, but not for any laying off reasons. They just switched to a new place. But I think that's what really helped me. I think show at least that person who believed in that work that I could come and do some maybe, some other things. I don't want to say bigger and better, but, just kind of push myself forward. And I was really able to do that there. So I was always thankful to that person for bringing me on. Um, got to the first, and actually this was during the pandemic. So not to go into too much of that aspect, but it did impact production, across the board, big, small. So at that point, I wasn't able to utilize a studio. The first series that I had to produce for their YouTube channel had to be filmed in my home garage where I was living at that time,
Oh,
remotely. Yeah.
wow.
So I had the smallest crew imaginable for the production that we were going into, which is partly my fault, and it kind of became a joke because I get so interested in building out creative that I sort of blew it up on myself. But we pulled it off, and I was really glad about that. So we had, I was able to hire a PA who actually also we worked with previously, and then a food stylist local from the area. So it was really the three of us. So I had to play a character, at least in the hands. I had to learn a bunch of cooking techniques, which I did via Zoom with the wonderful other, collaborators and colleagues I had at ATK Kids side, teaching me how to do these interesting things with food that I had never done before with rubber gloves on. The whole thing it sounds kind of wild. So I get there. But yeah, trying to film that during the pandemic, keep everybody safe, but have a good time, I think paid off. We won an award for that and were nominated for another one. So I was
Nice.
really proud of that work. Sorry, I had to move my computer.
No, you're good.
But I was really proud of that work. And I think that sort of shone through. And as I continued my career with America's Test Kitchen, I was able to become a managing producer for the team that essentially serviced all of the marketing needs after managing the kids team. Unfortunately, when that was sunset, just due to business reasons and needs. So yeah, I had a great time there. It was really unfortunate to have to leave, but if that's a transition into the next topics, I'd be happy to go there. Like,
Yeah.
what's life like afterwards, after exiting something like that?
Yeah, if you're comfortable talking about it, totally. Because I know it could be challenging coming out of I've seen a lot of posts, especially in the past couple days too, of people saying, how much they love the place that they were at and when you lose it. And I guess the analogy that we keep going back to is like a breakup,
Yeah,
dating. It's so similar to dating, right? Joe went in about that, Dylan, Sartak. So yeah, I mean, yeah, if you're cool with talking about it, I'm
yeah,
sure people will
definitely,
find helpful, So
definitely.
yeah.
Sorry, give me one second. My
Right,
face
right.
keeps popping up here, and I don't want to see it.
You're good, man.
It's distracting me.
Yeah, you're fine.
I don't know.
I haven't even been looking at you actually. I just keep my face up here so I can look
Yeah,
how
you
I
just
look the entire time.
making
Yeah,
sure
yeah.
our
But
beards are
I have
looking.
it
Whose
here.
whose beard is more epic? I think yours.
Yeah. No, no. They're both great in different ways. I'd say that.
Yeah, no, I think some people can, I read an article from someone, I won't say their name. I don't really know them, but we're connected on LinkedIn, and they recently were laid off as well after like 14 years, I guess, at a toy company, funny enough. So I was kind of interested, and their article was very inspiring. They really put it out there as I just want to sort of say what I have to say. It certainly wasn't something that was negative or trashing the previous employer. They had nothing good to say, similar as I do. But at the same time, I just found it really nice to read after this time that has gone by, because it was someone who was feeling optimistic about the future and not, even though it can be hard and difficult in the beginning, or you have different emotions that you kind of go through, you eventually want to look forward and think about, where either where you're going to go or what you want to change about your direction going forward. So there are definitely a lot of people like yourself who are putting these types of things out there that I think others can take value from, can take something from and of value. So
Yeah.
thanks again to you and, even
Yeah.
the person who wrote that article. So if anyone is looking for that kind of support, it is out there. If you come across it, I find it to be helpful.
Good. Yeah, I honestly I wouldn't have done this had if I was still in the corporate world or had my job that I got laid off from. It wouldn't have struck me, to be quite honest. So
Yeah.
yeah, there's definitely a silver lining to it. Not just for personal projects, but also, yeah, to be able to try to help the community. Because it's unfortunate. Like you never want to see people lose their jobs. Um, we're all here to make a living, and that's that.
Yeah.
So
That's
um,
true. That's
yeah,
true. Well, I guess if you're interested, what my experience, or at least what I had gone through afterwards, at first was honestly, there was a lot of pressure not to go too deep into it, but there was a lot of changes happening. There was a lot of challenges, and there became, for someone who's a creative background, there was a lot of, managing a team also as a producer and trying to be creative. There was a lot of administrative work that really needed to be done. I will say there was I really had there while there were some people working with me really hard to affect that kind of change, there also seemed to be a lot of opposition or at least lack of willingness to make those changes, which would benefit everybody, even though the evidence was there. So yeah, I was at first almost relieved because, as I was in shock, but as a few days went by and I didn't feel like I was just sort of working constantly in many ways. Um, I felt almost like, okay, here's a breath of fresh air for me to sort of reevaluate what I'm doing. So I took it upon myself to cut myself that sort of slack, and I don't know, take a month or so off to just work on updating my website, my resume, kind of looking at back at what I've done and what I really did like about it. And I would say one thing that I was able to reflect on, almost immediately in going through that process was, and I would say I've been fortunate, those different jobs, whether it was you and I at the toy company, which also featured, the educational side,
yeah.
where as part of the video team, we got to tell those stories and meet those kids and adults and people who are just so inspiring and tell those stories. And the same thing was true for me, America's Test Kitchen, or I worked on a TV show before both of those, which also actually coincidentally dealt with food. Um, and with some of the people I've worked with along the way as well, like Single Light Media, things like that, my friend's production company, who is now Fresh Features, but they work on content. All these companies have really done something that has and adds value, whether it's inspiring kids through STEM education, giving them some, community or teaching people how to live healthier or be introduced to new types of cultural cuisine. There's something that's like a give back from the work that we do, and that's really important to me. And
Like
that's something
mission
I've
driven stuff.
yeah, I've also been a motion designer and producer for companies where I'm just sort of purely slinging ads that quite frankly, don't help people. And that never felt good. So while that has been the minimal part of my career over the past 15 years or so, yeah, taking stock of where I spent the most time and the people that I did meet and the types of impacts that not me alone, but these corporations, companies, or individual teammates, have put into the work to tell these stories. That's pretty powerful, and that makes a difference, I think. So, I was really able to reflect on that and make sure going forward that that was the type of job seeking, job hunting that I still on now today.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that time to take some space and go through all of those types of emotions, like, wow, this is a little bit shocking to have this happen. Oh, what am I going to do now? And then to take some breathing room and think about what it is you have done and what you enjoyed the most. Which, as I said, for me is something that feels like it's meaningful to somebody else,
Yeah.
um, was important.
Yeah, totally. And Joe brushed on that, right? Joseph talked about that with school, right?
Yeah.
And really taking the time to figure out what specifically you want to add to the community if you're pursuing a graduate degree, right? But yeah, I mean, to your point, uh, this kind of gives you a time to take a step back and figure out like what you truly value, right? Because it's so easy to just kind of throw a bunch of applications out there and hope that one sticks. But then there's a chance that you could end up in a place that you're not happy with, right? Or some place that keeps you for a little bit and, once again, thrown to the curb. But, I've had positions in the past or, tried going from one place to another, trying to get out of like a toxic environment, and I end up at a place that I don't want to be at. So, I can relate to that to where I'm a lot more intentional about the jobs that I'm applying to. Yeah, there's still like over 100 applicants I see on LinkedIn or whatever. I don't have to look at that if I go directly to their website also. But yeah, yeah, I think it could possibly help those who are in a similar position if they are just out there throwing applications out there. Just really take the time to think about what you want, right? Um, and even if it's not in the corporate world, like just doing whatever with you want with your life. I actually talked to a guy the other day, and he was saying how he left the corporate world and ended up just working on a boat. And now he described his life as just a bunch of side missions. Um,
Yeah.
but he loves that, because
Yeah.
the monotony is boring to him. So,
Hmm.
uh,
Hmm.
but yeah,
Uh,
anyway,
yeah, well, actually, I think that's interesting because another phase I feel like myself, I had gone through, maybe others too, I'm sure, is you have, I don't know if it's an existential crisis or not, but you're sort of like, what am I even doing in this
yeah,
hectic, fast-paced, high demand sort of creative corporate world,
yeah,
um, which there is a lot of passion for.
yeah,
But you do, I think sometimes you start to wonder, is there something else, is there something else that could make me feel just as fulfilled and happy, and that isn't tied to all of the money and the hard work I did getting, multiple degrees and interning and working at these jobs and always trying your best, to be laid off or something like that. It can feel a little yeah, it can feel a little disheartening, but you start to think like, well, what else, is there? And I think that's worth exploring. I'm doing that myself, so I don't know if it's helpful for people to hear um, from someone who has put a lot of effort and dedication and yeah, monetary value into this type of work. Where do you go? And I think it's okay to, yeah, take that room or that space to evaluate honestly with yourself, is there another direction? And, I thought about this the other day when I was in that sort of zone of thinking, just to myself, processing things and saying, do I feel beholden to all of those things that I just mentioned, the effort, the degrees, the monetary value, the hard work I've put in, sacrifice, for many people at different levels, to not give up, but to look in another direction. Should I do that, or am I sort of betraying, all that I've been working for? And for me personally, I would say that where I'm leaning is, and I wouldn't, certainly there are circumstances that may dictate differently for people, but I would say like, no, I don't think you need to um, look at it that way. I'm still figuring this out myself, but I'm starting to, in my own, frame of mind, say that it is okay, you're not sacrificing all of that hard work because all of that has led you to where you are now.
yeah,
And the decision by somebody else in a company, however high up they may be, to lay off one, many people all at once or over time, it doesn't really take that away. And if you have that kind of passion, you'll probably find other ways to continue doing it. You've been putting out some wonderful designs and work that I like to see.
Thank
Uh,
you.
Honestly, I can't say I've been doing that personally, only because, well, I've kept busy with some of that freelance work up until more recently. But I'm also, I have a family, I have a wife and a son, and I've really looked at that time, just to go back to this total process for me. Um, as yeah, as an opportunity to spend more time with my son. So I've really taken that to heart. I'll pick him up early from school. I get to play with him longer in the morning. I don't have to come home after picking him up and open my laptop, get right back to work, sending emails, checking on stuff, reviewing videos, setting up projects, until his mom comes home and we can sort of trade off. So
Yeah,
in terms of the silver lining, there can be many, and if
totally.
that's not, another person's circumstance, I'm sure there's something else similar. But just for me, that's really been meaningful. And I don't think there's nothing that could ever take that away in the future or the past. So
No, and he'll remember that too, you know.
I hope, I
Yeah,
hope so.
absolutely. Yeah, I mean that would definitely be a core memory, at least for me personally, you know. And I obviously speak for everyone. So,
Oh yeah, you have a podcast,
yeah,
so this
yeah,
is
it's I'm a vessel.
it's a final word.
Yeah. No. But going back to your point about having sort of like an existential crisis with, um do I owe it to myself to commit to sticking with a certain industry or whatever, I think the question also is like, who's it for, who do you feel you owe it to? Is it to yourself, because the journey really is, it's all about the journey, right? Not to get like too deep into it or anything like that, but like we made choices to pursue certain things, and if they don't work out, then there are other opportunities out there. And also people have a tendency, I think, to define themselves based off of the jobs that they have, and maybe this is an opportunity for you to sort of figure out like who you are outside of the position that you are, the title that you have, like I'm a graphic designer on paper, but I'm more than that, Um, but yeah, I don't know. I guess my point being like, who's it for, and um what do you want out of whatever you're doing, I guess, right? It seems pretty obvious, but maybe it's something somebody hasn't thought about. But yeah. So, we had talked on the phone off camera about how I ended up getting a job at Trader Joe's. And so there's not one day where I go into work where I'm stressed out. There's not one day that I leave stressed out either,
Yeah.
I do the work, I get it done, and I come home. Is it Am I at the point there where I could have a sustainable life off of it? Not at the moment, but there will be opportunities for that in the future, So, yeah, I know that also plays a big factor in it too, with the job search and everything like that.
Yeah.
Especially if you have student loans or whatever it is, and this would be a whole other conversation of like living below your means and everything like that. And I'm not one to give financial advice by any means, but some things to think about, I think.
Yeah. Well, I think that's important. I mean, that's the thing too, is there are opportunities to remake yourself or reshape your direction. I sort of alluded to that earlier in my really maybe awkward synopsis of my background. I went to college to do audio production, and after doing that a little bit, uh, I didn't really want to do that every day. And so I had to at that point reevaluate. It was different. I think the feeling that was maybe different about it, at least one feeling that was different was I made that decision, and what happened to me recently was someone else's decision. It wasn't what I was looking for.
Yeah.
So I think that's a distinction, but whether you make the decision or somebody makes it for you and you're upset or relieved or whatever it might be, yeah, I think it's about persevering and looking forward, but not neglecting maybe, all those other emotions. But when it comes to, yeah, when we were talking about Trader Joe's, that's kind of the idea is there's going to be some groundwork, right? You start, but you look at what are the opportunities. When I was working, I'm not sure how many of the viewers would remember or know about this, but so when I decided to not continue pursuing professionally audio production and all of that, I was working at Apple in the Boston area as a creative. So they used to offer these training sessions, and that was what gave me the opportunity to go to SCAD, or at least open my eyes to the possibility. And so we're talking, this is back in 2007, 2008 when I started there. Um, and through that job, I met different producers, production companies, people who would want to come in, learn how to make their videos better. So I started getting certified in all these Apple. I was fortunate they offered an opportunity to become certified, to take those training classes, to take those tests, to get those certifications. By the time I left, I was one of the top trainers there. Certain people would, I mean, in my area, I'm not trying to brag or anything, but I'm just
Oh,
saying I made a connection with people. I found something that I really cared about, not just as a hobby, because then I would go home, I would film stuff, I'd make my own things. But then I got to do it for work, and it spanned audio, video, and that's where I figured out, oh, there's this whole world of bringing all these medias together. Animation, 3D, which wasn't as huge at the time like it is now, but that was there, and things like YouTube were, coming out, and all of this, there's a proliferation of media coming together in this sort of confluence where I didn't even know what it was called. And I literally remember going home one day saying, I don't really want to work here forever. Even though I felt like I had been fairly successful, at least in my own mind. Um, it was great because and what I mean by that is I was doing so well helping people learn that I was learning so much myself. It inspired me to go and continue that and to do a greater service in that regard, both for myself and for others. So maybe that ties it back to my reflection on the work that I do being meaningful, not just for myself, but for others in some real capacity.
totally.
So even within Apple, I had opportunities to travel to other stores around the Boston area and train other trainers on how to do these types of things in certain ways, to write curriculums for new positions they were opening and teach multi-day courses with some of my colleagues of how this would work. Those were all like huge opportunities for me at a young age that inspired me. So. I think, when getting back to, I remember I went to my house and just was searching like animation, video, like whatever words together and Google
Yeah.
that and like best school. Um, and it popped up with SCAD. SCAD was like the first thing that came up. A funny story, I don't think I've probably ever told you, was my girlfriend, who's now my wife at the time, who I also worked with. I told her, I said, hey, I'm thinking about going back to school for this. She knew what I did. And I said, for this, to get a real degree in it and learn more. So, oh yeah, interesting. Where's the school? And I was like, well, it's far away. It's called like Savannah College of Art and Design. And she kind of stopped and looked at me and she was like, have you not been listening? This is probably not great. She was like, have you not been listening? Like I'm applying for my master's degree. Like that's one of the schools I'm applying to. So
Nice.
So,
Fun.
yeah, just
Subconsciously, she planted the seed,
yeah,
maybe.
I think it was really
Yeah.
probably her.
Yeah.
It was, I should say that at least.
Yeah.
No,
You're
but
like, I'm
she,
only teasing, sweetie.
yeah,
Oh.
yeah, exactly. I'm sleeping. She's whispering a plot.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
No, but that was sort of amazing and really funny, actually. But so we both got in and we both
Yeah.
went. Anyway, I probably lost track of where I
No,
initially
you're good.
started,
You're
but
good. This is
that was
it's
kind of funny.
supposed to go all over the place anyway, but no, you're definitely staying on topic. Um, Yeah, SCAD was such a great school. I really enjoyed my time there too. Going on to job stuff, I'm
Yeah.
curious about how your job search has been so far. I know you were telling me you've had interviews and stuff like that too. So, just kind of curious, like your experience with the job search. Is there anything that you feel is working well for you, or anything that you've thought about that you want to improve upon, with your job search or whatever?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I have had a few interviews, and not right off the bat, though. Quite frankly, they happened to start not immediately, but within the first like week or two of when I upgraded my LinkedIn to premium again.
Really?
Yeah.
Dude,
So
I had no luck with premium, so it's interesting to hear this, you know?
I can't say that that's what it was. All I
Yeah,
can say, whether it was coincidental or not, um, that was really when things picked up for me. It had been, I sort of debated they offer the free, oh, for a month free. And I used it during the pandemic when I left the toy company willingly,
yeah,
and was looking for a change. And I had been working for another company. Um, I got hired pretty randomly during the pandemic, felt easier for some random
yeah.
reason to me.
Huh.
So it was only a couple months I was working for a company here in Boston while I was still remote, but still applying because that actually happened to be one I mentioned earlier wasn't not as fulfilling, but it was helping pay the bills and helping me with my financial goals. But I yeah I had been using Premium then, so I was like, well, you know what? I'll give it a shot. I did the free month trial, forgot to unsubscribe to it, so ended up paying their whopping price for it,
Yeah,
and and I have it now. So I would say about a week after that, yeah, I ended up with like a couple interviews with a few different places. One was like a local TV station, which I was really excited about. But unfortunately, it was odd. Maybe I'll tell you a little bit about this story if it helps people as well. They said, "Why don't you just wait a week? I'm going on vacation, and I'll contact you to see if we can keep talking further." So, okay. The week goes by, I had said a thank you. I really enjoyed the conversation, not just etiquette in my mind, that's just, it is etiquette, but I think it's meaningful. Um, the following week, radio silence. Gave it several days, you're just coming back from vacation. There's a lot of work to do. Again, just kind of kept going like, without, I didn't want to be bothersome, so I wasn't emailing every day, but I sent maybe two or three follow-ups just saying, hey, is there any chance we can still talk? Or have you filled the position? And yeah, so I never heard back from that. That was kind of the end of that first interview. So I don't know if I would say it set the stage for my expectations going forward, but it definitely led me, or reminded me, I should say, that yeah, you really can't, at least in this current environment, get your hopes up in my mind, at least in my mind. I think you do have to be a little guarded.
yeah,
Because, about a week later, I had another interview. That was sort of the other reason, is I was trying to hear back because I had already had another interview and was set up to have another one with a different company. And so I was sort of, caught up between those things. Um, I sort of let that one go, of course, and was moving ahead through about 3 rounds, 2 or 3 rounds with this other company. That didn't work out as well. That one also a little bit of a story there, if it's relatable. It felt like I had been ghosted, but I reached out to one of the people that I had talked with, and they did send me what I felt like was an earnest message about that they thought they did email me. It was apparently still sitting in their like draft whatever box. They were very apologetic, and but by the end of the lengthy email, there was a late stage candidate they went with. So again, a little bit of a setback there, in terms of my
yeah,
thinking, because again, it felt like it went well, and it's really hard to hear when you get emails like that where they're like, the people you talked with really enjoyed talking with you. Like they say all these things that I have no reason not to think it's that disingenuous with this type of email. It certainly wasn't a form email. But you're saying, okay, well, I guess it wasn't good enough. Um, and then, I've had other interviews where I've made it pretty far, so far that I've even done like producer assignments where I've done work for free
yeah.
for them. And yeah, it's like you hear this, okay, we'll be in touch. Oh, another week goes by and you email and, again, it just falls off. it falls off. So, uh,
Yeah.
yeah, it's been a lot of different experiences. I think the most recent one for me, just the other week, was a recruiter reached out to me telling me that, oh, I think it'd be really great for this company. I loved what I saw on your reel and on your website. Let's keep talking. What's a good time for you? So, I messaged them back, oh, that's great. And then the following message is, oh, well, another person, or, what I'm hearing is that you have too much experience. Like they're not going to hire you because your tenure is just too much for what they're looking for. Even though all of my skills and background align with it, they sent me the pay scale. I was happy with that because I really don't like when these companies aren't really providing their pay scale, or they're asking you to tell them. Feels like they use that as a leveraging chip on their end, a bargaining chip. If they can get someone for cheaper,
Yeah.
but they also like is what at least that's how that comes off to me.
Yeah. And you need
Um,
to have a number now, it seems like, because in
Yeah.
the past, even like 5 years or something, I use this scale because it's literally only been like, I guess maybe 6 years since I've been like in the industry post grad. But like you used to be able to just put negotiable,
Yeah.
but
Yep.
now you need to have a number in the
hmm
application, which really
Yeah.
sucks, you know?
Yeah. It does suck. And even I would even say like one of the companies I was really interested in working with that I went through those couple of rounds with, I was almost surprised that they did that. I just felt like that company would have been more upfront and I don't know, just forthcoming with this is, if you would like this job, this is the pay scale. So if you're okay with that and you've applied, then we're gonna, we kind of assume that we'll double check with you, of course, but to sort of ask the person who's applying and not tell you whether that's on target or not feels to me like they're taking that so that they can put it in their little list
Yeah.
so that when they talk to someone else and they're like, wow, we have these two great people, but this person's number is like 10 grand less.
Yeah.
That feels like the corporate world, now is
Yeah.
they want more for less a lot. And I consider myself to be a reasonable and fair person. And I'm at the point, like I said, I'm the type of person where, like that first interview, I was willing to accept way less money than
Yeah.
what I'm used to because I really wanted to do that work. I don't know if that's valued as much as it should be.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm not speaking for everybody or all these companies, but it certainly feels that way.
Yeah. Well, it's not even a matter of speaking for them, but when you see a trend happening over and over and you hear people talking about the same things,
Yeah.
and that's what I'm trying to shed light to with having different guests on who have experienced this as well. There's a lot of common ground there, with their search or interviews. And to your point, not taking away from your stories either, but also to reinforce that fact that, I had applied at a university for a graphic design position, and they had reached out before even an interview stage, asking if I could do like an infographic for them. So I threw it together, sent it over to them. They never got back to me, right? Maybe
Mhm.
a couple weeks later or a week later, I reached out, just following up, wanted to see if you had any thoughts on it.
Mhm.
No response. Couple weeks later, I finally get an email back, and it's just rejecting me. So
Oh.
it's never an interview process. It was just they wanted an infographic, and that was that. And then more recently, well, more recently than that, but a few months after I had been laid off, I applied to there was this startup, like this gaming startup, and they wanted some artwork for like an arcade, like gaming system,
Mhm.
whatever. Um, and so based on the brief, I gave them an illustration, and I also went above and beyond, and that's by my choice, of course, with a concept for expanding upon the concept. And they got back to me and they were like, "Thank you so much for the time that you put into this. Like, we really enjoyed the graphic, and we also really appreciate the additional like the narrative and etc. Therefore, we will not be moving forward with your application." And that was that. So
Yeah.
I'm like, it's one of those things where you get the positive feedback. I could relate to what you experienced, but then the rejection right after. So there's just a lot of things that aren't lining up. Um,
Yeah.
I I don't even have a solution on how these things could be fixed, right? But like, I don't know. I hope that by having these conversations, things may get addressed at some point, or things will evolve. But yeah, something's got to change. And I'm so sorry that like that has been your experience so far. But I know just you as a person, you're such a great person. You're so genuine. You're so authentic. You have a fantastic moral compass. Wherever you end up is they're going to be so lucky, Lee.
Well, thank you. That's very
100%.
nice.
Yeah.
It's very gracious of you. I mean, this has always sort of been my motto, and I actually got part of this from a professor at SCAD, who used to say it all the time. And well, and they were maybe I don't know how many years they were there. I don't think they were there too many years. I was really fortunate enough to have them, but they also were, I think, an associate creative director at like Buck, had good experience and knew what it was like to do the kind of work. And, they used to say, like, do good work,
Yeah.
uh, which I think off the cuff might seem like, oh, but don't you want to do like exponentially great, amazing, fantastical work? And I think the point of that was when you do this when you do this kind of work, you're going to have those opportunities by putting yourself into them and doing the great part of it. But what you're really always trying to do is really do good work. Do good
Yeah.
work all the time. Yes, go above and beyond when and where necessary, but also know when to hold yourself accountable to what is needed. I
Sure.
I think coming from the management side of having managed a few different teams, is you see people who are working really hard and they get really caught up in the work that they're doing, which is not a bad thing. But sometimes you have to like pull them back and remind them that there's this, but that, this corporate world, like there's also this and this and this and this. And we have to produce all of those and we have to do good work across the board. And so if we're going really hard on this, not that we're not going to do our best work, um, we may neglect something over here. So I
Sure.
think, the last positions I've had as a creative manager and helping sort of build these successful teams, I like to think of them as is like, how do you allow these creative people to do their great work all the time so that we're all doing good work across the board? And so I just always love the way that it came across from that professor. Just, like do good work. And so I would tell my teams that all the time. I would remind them in
Love that.
meetings like, hey, we're all here. You're all working really hard. The work is great. What are we trying to do? We're trying to do good work together. So
Yeah.
I think it does mean something more than it might sound initially. Anyway, that's sort of a,
I love that. And thank you for the title of this video.
oh yeah, sure. There you
So.
go. Do good work. Yeah, and maybe to expand it's a little bit related. I sort of have mentioned that being on the other side, having been someone who has had to go through hundreds of applications and look through and give grade ratings and look at portfolios. Honestly, I think from in my experience, there's always an area of that you can sort of say, okay, this isn't right, this isn't right. But there's then the category that you end up with that can be hard decisions. And there's been a couple of times where I've had to make hard decisions, challenging decisions, and um, I just feel like the empathy that I had then, because I had been working consistently for so long, it has like a greater meaning to me now. Not that I'm, laying awake crying, but I'm just like, it's odd to have the power of rejection and also offer, Not that you do it alone, there's a tiring team, right?
Yeah.
When you're the person that they would be your direct report, you're trying to build a team that is going to be cohesive, that will work well. You have to consider your current team member. There's a lot of balancing, and then the work. Then you do need the work to be able to stand up. So I think, yeah, it's also been really just like a, maybe a well-rounded, if not in, if not the best scenario for me, but having had that experience, even with Hexbug, in a more minimal sense, where I would help to go look for interns. We
Yeah.
brought some really great interns, and I had that opportunity a couple times. To go back to SCAD and find, some people, and the lines are super long, and how hard people are working, and there's some tough decisions you have to make. So as I'm applying now and I go into these interviews, I know that there's strong competition. There's a lot of people applying, and somebody on the other side potentially has to make a hard decision. So I don't know. It's an interesting perspective, I think.
Yeah.
Um,
And I wonder how much of it, I think it also comes down to the systems that are in place with applying too. It's not always going to be an actual person who's rejecting you. And um, it would be nice if there was more clarity on or maybe uniformity when it came to like the process of applying to places, because some places it's going to go through an AI system, some places it's going to go through an actual human. So it's not always the fault of a hiring manager or something like that, right? Because you might not even get to that stage. But yeah, I'm kind of rambling right there. But I think
that's okay.
to your point, I think that's healthy to have an empathetic perspective from that viewpoint too, because it's not all about pointing fingers right now. There's a lot of people up and way higher up who have control over what's going on right now. Um, yeah.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right and very smart to bring up the different or the discrepancies between how applications are filtered, how applicants are viewed or reviewed, and reached out to or rejected. I have another story that might be interesting for people, or at least a life lesson uh,
Yeah.
from my own experience.
Let's hear it.
So. I guess, I did apply and am utilizing unemployment benefits
Yeah.
currently. Um, However, I had a lot of trouble with it right at the beginning because, they tell you, of course, you want to sign up within the first week or so of being laid off, or first couple weeks at least, which I did do, but I did wait because, again, I was really processing a lot in the beginning. I was comfortable. I didn't feel like I needed to jump on that right away. So I waited maybe 3 weeks. However, when I went to sign up, it turns out somebody had already stolen my social security, had known that I had been laid off, and was collecting benefits for like that month, basically.
What?
Yes. So I was unable to enroll. So I did email my previous employer.
You're not the only one who's told me this. Just so
Really?
you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, go on though.
No, that's interesting
That's
to hear.
crazy.
I haven't heard this from anyone that I know. But yes, so definitely one, if you are laid off and you're able to um, take those benefits, do it immediately to mitigate any gap between, that end date and when you need, even like if you're fortunate, I would say I'm fortunate that I was able to kind of push that off for a few weeks. I know that wouldn't be the case necessarily for everybody, and you'd be thinking about it right away. But yeah, there's a risk if you wait, and I think I really got burned by that. Um, Without going through the whole saga, I have been able to rectify that, but it took a lot of a lot of work. It was really, there was a lot of, I guess, anxiety about around having that identity theft, type of situation. The time it takes to file all those reports that you need to do. I had to call the IRS. Actually, this is probably interesting to hear talking to the person at the IRS. They actually did tell me that that they do see and field a lot of these calls from places that are high income earners. They're targeted by fraudsters, as it were, or
Oh shit.
ne'er-do-wells. So a place like Boston, much of New England, New York, LA, whatever, or California, but yeah, they're targeted pretty, not exclusively, but very heavily because the percentage that you get from unemployment based off a higher income, of course, is going to give them a higher benefit that they're stealing essentially.
Right.
So yeah, it took months. It took months, and it's not easy to talk to the to get in touch with all of these people. So
Yep.
it was really, yeah, it was really stressful. I am fortunate enough that the delay, well, it wasn't easy. I wasn't at risk of losing my home, but I could only imagine if there were people who couldn't pay their rent or pay their mortgage or buy necessities for themselves or their children. It was a really scary position to be put in.
Yeah.
And I did email as soon as I found out. I had emailed my previous employer to say, hey, just so you're aware, someone is collecting these benefits who is not me, just in case you're receiving any information from these agencies. Um, I don't really know what they would say, but basically they were like, sorry to hear that happened. Thanks for letting us know. So
Yeah.
there's really no one to help you other than, calling these 1-800 numbers and going through your state and I guess the IRS. So
To me, it seems like sometimes there are possibly tests that you're put on to like
mm.
really prove how badly you want or need the unemployment.
Yeah, yeah,
It
exactly.
just seems a little dirty, but
Yeah,
yeah,
it feels like it's from the people I've talked to that have utilized it, it feels like it can happen differently for almost everyone.
yeah,
But it's really unsettling when you go to sign up and there's a few things you put in and to establish your account and they ask you for, you put in your social security number, um, and then it wants to verify with you before, to put, create a password and somebody else's email and phone number shows up.
yeah,
And, like that's really weird.
yeah,
I do at this point, I really do have one background, but I feel like I have multiple resumes that sort
yeah.
of, are like cobbling together what I think an AI system might want to hear, and that hasn't been a really fun experience for me personally because trying to guess what a person or potentially an AI bot is going to want to pull out and then immediately reject you or put you into another pile before you're rejected is sort of odd, and I've even started to create, I have cover letters as well where I've said things that I want to say, but then I wonder, oh, is that gonna like turn these people off for some reason? Even if it's an illegitimate thought, it does cross my mind. I'm like, am I writing this the right way? Um, and
I've
of course,
also just wondered in general the value behind cover letters, if it still exists,
yeah,
because not to interrupt you,
not at all.
I did. But yes, so I say
Please.
that, but I did it. But like I write cover letters too, but I never hear back from anybody.
Yeah.
So like I don't hear back from people.
Hmm.
So like talking about having the relationship be both ways, like a healthy dating relationship, right? It should be, there's two roads. So um I don't know, just knowing whether or not it helps because you're investing a lot of time into these
Hmm.
things, just to have nothing back. There needs to be some sort of support with that. But yeah, to your, going back to you, it sounds like you tailor it towards the job that you're applying to, right? Based on the skills that you do possess, right? But
Hmm.
gearing it towards that specific position with the goal that it passes through, that filtering stage or whatever, right?
Yeah, yeah, I think that's better said than how I did. Yeah, it's sort of taking it's not being disingenuous, but it's sort of like I could lay it out this way or I could lay it out this way. Like, what do you want to hear from me? Like at this point, what do I need to say to somebody to hear back to help you understand that like I'm a hard worker, I want to do the work. I want to build good interpersonal relationships with my colleagues and support them
Have you tried I love you?
and do good work. Oh, I always say I love you. I
Okay, yeah, that's
that's
like the best way to
how I
close it
end
out.
it. Yeah. That's how I end it
Yeah.
every time. Yeah, I mean, I've also made mistakes, silly mistakes, not in this go round, but in the past. Um, and these are like the rookie mistakes, when after I left the toy company, I remember a couple times applying for jobs that I was really interested in and just forgetting to change. I had written the name of the company somewhere and I
Oh,
like forgot because I was going too fast. I mean, when you send out so many, you're talking hundreds of applications and things over time, those things can happen. So I beat myself up a couple times over that, not even knowing whether it would really made a difference, but just, I like to think that I'm a thoughtful and, that I take the time to review these things, that it's sincere. And yeah, you see that and you're like, wow, I just like shot myself in the foot there. Great. Blew
yeah.
that, totally. And it's not reflective of who I am in my work, but when you present it that way, like how are they supposed to know? So there are mistakes that can happen, and I think it can, maybe that is a problem for somewhere that you really wanted to get into, and I don't know, but having a little bit of grace there. But it's just interesting now, having so I've been working a long time, really, not necessarily in this career, but I was the type of person growing up in Western Mass. My parents had me going to work when I was 12. You're basically, your uncle has a home improvement. He has his own home improvement company. You're gonna go do roofing for the summer and siding and replacing windows and doors. And so there's me and my older sister scraping shingles off of roofs and caulking in windows and doing
You
minor plumbing and
guys
electricity.
could fit into the tiny places, right?
Yeah, we were the ones that had to crawl. Yeah, dangerous stuff at times, actually, looking back, but this is a while ago, but yeah, and I mean, like, I just think about it from my own perspective. It was like, okay, that was like technically, I guess, like my first job that I was paid for, working for my uncle during the summer because I wasn't gonna just sit around watching cartoons or playing, Super Nintendo or something. Which is great because it helps build like a good work ethic. From there after that, growing up, I've worked everywhere from doing that. I did house painting through high school with a company from a friend's dad. And when I wasn't doing that during the summer, I was working at like D'Angelo's sandwich shop. Maybe they'll be a sponsor for you.
That'd be sick. Yeah,
Hear
Turkey
that,
Club.
D'Angelo's? Circle back.
Okay.
Working at like country stores out in Western Mass. Um, I worked at Westover Air Base cleaning C-5A airplanes, wearing this huge raincoat suit, getting chemical sludge in my eyes and rinsing them out. Like I've
Heck.
done so many different things like that. Worked at Urban Outfitters on Newberry Street, at Blockbuster and Brookline. Um, like the list just goes on. I've done so many different jobs, and when I entered the more professional world, I feel like a lot of that sort of paid off in terms of like you get to know different people. It
Yeah.
gives you all these great skills to communicate well with people. Um, it gives you a good work ethic, a good understanding of how things work and how teams work, what it takes to get a lot of different types of jobs done, which has maybe aided me in my understanding of creative teams and what each person might need to complete a project together because it's definitely an all hands kind of thing in many respects. Um, and it's like, how do you put that on paper?
Yeah.
How do you convince or tell somebody without getting to talk to them ever that like, hey, I have a lot of respect for work and hard work and working teams and people, and I would just like to be part of that and to do that kind of work. Um,
I feel like that's your cover letter right there.
You know, if they matter, to your point.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
Sure.
I try to synthesize, some of that,
Yeah.
but I don't know how that helps certain
Well,
people looking through
circling
your
back
work.
to your point of like value, the value, or if I don't know what they're looking to bring in, right? Like if they do value those things now, or if it is just kind of strictly a numbers thing
Mhm.
where we're trying to get the cheapest. Um, cheapest person in here with the most experience or whatever, the cheapest labor we could possibly get at the moment to reach whatever numbers. But sorry,
Yeah.
continue your thought. Uh,
No,
yeah,
no, that's a good addition because sadly, I don't know any of this for a true fact, but it feels that way. Even the last year, I would say in the corporate role I had, it definitely became. I definitely know that me and others did feel more like numbers, and that we were only there to serve the purpose of generating numbers, which is important. I don't. I'm not saying that the business end of things doesn't matter,
yeah,
and the bottom line isn't important.
totally.
But when you see overnight hardworking people who have contributed a lot and could still contribute, just let go. Like I woke up one morning to find out like half my team is gone,
Mm,
and then everyone we collaborated with was gone. And then, okay, so what am I doing now? And you think about those people, and it's like, was there really nowhere else in the company? Was there really a salary higher at the top that couldn't be adjusted slightly to help other people? I don't know. I think that's where a lot of people these days are a little, um, I don't know, like mystified or feel buried under the corporate greed. Um,
yeah. And something I experienced is when I started a new job somewhere, uh my manager my manager direct report was let go like a couple weeks later, and so the team I was on didn't have a leader or anything, but they weren't the only person in a leadership position that was let go. So the trend here is, you know the people who are making more are the ones that they're going to let go,
mhm,
to save some money. But then that also begs the question, where's the incentive to want to grow within a company as well? I'm not
mhm,
saying this is going to be the same no matter where you go. I'm not generalizing, but this is objectively my experience. Um, at that point, I'm like, okay, well, if I do like grow into a director position or something like that, and there seems to be a trend of layoffs, like why would I want to grow here
yeah,
to become a director to be the first target, you know?
yeah,
Um,
exactly. That's a good point.
and if you're going to be taking on that amount of labor, like no one's going to want to be like, yeah, I want to be a director now, but I still want to make this amount, you
Hmm.
know? Give me
Hmm.
more responsibility, but less
But
money,
but not with the
just so I'm safe,
monetary.
Like what's it for at that point, right?
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, and there's, I mean, the thing is, I talked to someone over the weekend actually, who is in a totally different field and had experienced all of these same things that we're talking about, and your other guests have brought up that I've seen speak. So even within other fields, there's this all the ghosting, all of the trying to create your resume to make you look like some shining trophy on a mountaintop,
Yeah.
the best of the best of the best,
Yeah.
to drive all your numbers exactly where you want them to go. Uh, it happens, sort of across the board, it feels like. So I don't know for people like us, what kind of conclusions can we draw? If you're across fields feeling like you're nervous to advance because you don't want to end up on a chopping block because of that salary that you have, or maybe I think during the pandemic, maybe or maybe coming out of the pandemic, I should say, there was an influx of a certain level, like managers, let's say, or something, and now they realize they don't need so many. But I just wonder, no matter which profession or industry you're in, there's got to be some middle ground for some of these companies to look at the employees a little more in a harder light to say, I understand, yes, maybe not everyone could stay if you have to make a hard business financial decision. Um, but there's got to be some value to these people, to some of the people, and find a way to get them to stay. And I really hate to think that it's that cold, but it really, objectively, in my experience, has felt that way at times.
Sure. Yeah. And I don't know what's been going on the past few years for it to turn into something like this. But, before companies were even willing to fly candidates out to different states to interview them, to meet
Yeah.
the teams and stuff like that. And it's like, I've applied to jobs that are local to me, 10 minutes away,
Hmm.
literally. I am super accessible. and
Hmm.
I get nothing back, not even one round interview, you know?
Hmm.
So it's kind of crazy to me, you know?
Yeah,
Maybe they found a better candidate, but it's very surprising to me if they're looking for accessibility that yeah, that
yeah,
would be a thing.
yeah,
So,
that's true. There was, there's a lot of hybrid in our particular field these days. Of course, certain positions can't be. That's maybe a whole other debate or there's a lot of minutia in there we don't need to
yeah.
get into right now, but could probably have that be a whole episode. But yeah, I just find I agree. I don't know what's happened. Even since the last time I was applying to jobs and where we are now, and going back to my sort of ridiculous list of I'm probably forgetting some too of various jobs that I have had. I'm definitely leaving some out. But yeah, it's like I was saying to this person over the weekend because they were lamenting about the same thing that it just like how do you get a job now? You
Yeah.
can't go and talk to anybody in a like if you're local, accessible, it's not like you can go in talk to anybody and obviously this will make me sound really outdated and I'm not that old, but times have changed quite a bit. But a lot of those jobs back then I would just walk down, since I was in the Boston area, I'd like walk down a street in Boston and just go in these aren't the types of corporate jobs necessarily I'm talking about, but I've heard that it's even difficult for these other types of worthy positions out there. That's like, I just walk in and ask for a resume. They hand me a paper. I would fill it out. I'd do that for like six different places, and at least one of them would call me back and ask me if I wanted to be hired.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's a totally different world that's not an equivalent. But having lived through all of that kind of experience, it is totally wild to me now as you've expressed and others that you get an email about a job that's posted on LinkedIn, you go and there's already over 100 applicants.
Yeah.
I'm even hearing now the latest thing I've heard about resumes or cover letters is that what people are doing is putting white text on their resume that a recruiter or a real person could not see, but it's just a string or sentences of keywords that reflect what's in the job description so that an AI will pull you out because it could potentially find those. I don't know if this is actually working for anybody.
I was gonna ask that. Like, have you heard from anybody who has said
I don't know this
successful?
personally. It's just something I've read.
Okay.
So there's not a ton of weight behind whether
Yeah,
or not this is worth doing. And again, to me, it just feels so wrong because
it does.
it's like, what kind of game are we playing here? And if that is true, if that is working, I don't know, that doesn't make me feel very good because what that says to me is that the other side, the people who are employing whoever creatives or people in other fields, really really are playing this like a game,
Yeah.
and there's always a game factor to things and you do have to,
It should be healthy though.
but
Healthy.
that doesn't feel healthy. It should there's
Right.
I think there should be some boundaries. So I have not done that, but yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I like hearing that. I was like, that is,
And I have no
can't
intention of
be.
doing that either. Um,
Yeah, I mean, we'll both do it, but no, we have no intention.
so funny.
Now that we know about it, of
Right.
course I'll
Yeah.
do it, but I don't feel good about it.
Yeah.
No,
But
no, of
the thing
course not.
is, like, but then once again, to go back to the wasting of resources, like you're gonna get candidates going through um that aren't qualified, or shouldn't be in that position. And then, maybe they can bullshit their way through the entire interview, and then you've got somebody in there who's not qualified for the position. Then you got to go through this whole process again. So there just needs to be a human element to the process again. And right now, it's it's not it's not human at all. It's
Yeah,
completely the
I
opposite.
I I agree. It doesn't feel human at all. Maybe to end on a more positive note, though,
Yeah.
in that same
Let's
respect,
do that. Yeah.
I did have one experience that made me hopeful in terms of the endurance of the human spirit that does still exist out there. A company I applied for, uh, fairly local. Um, Upon applying, they had various statements that they did appreciate the time it takes for applicants to apply, that they were not going to make you wait a long time for any kind of decision. So a lot of upfront information about the process in many respects that you don't necessarily see everywhere. Or I know that I've seen something similar, but it doesn't, you do never hear back, so how much do you believe it really? Um, but I will say that they did hold true to their word, and it was a real person with an actual email with their name from the company
Awesome.
that wrote what I would say, in my opinion, was a legitimate, not a form letter. Maybe some of it is a little, but there were definitely elements to it. Um, and it was actually, it really did feel like a human, and it felt genuine, even though they decided they were going to go in another direction, as they say, or whatever the phrasing was. Yeah, I actually really appreciated that. And even though I wasn't considered for an interview, um, it actually did not feel quite as terrible or just like a bummer because of the way that it was presented
Yeah,
back to me. So I
that's
would say
great.
that it does exist. It is out there, based at least on that one experience that I had. But yeah, I think hopefully we can turn a corner. And as you said earlier, hopefully conversations like this and the more people in these communities can come together to support each other, things will change. Maybe employers will get the picture, get the message that, yeah, they should put a more human touch on some of this process.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree, and I hope so too. User experience, it should be considered throughout the entire process, not just about the products that you're putting out, but also bringing people in, and how you treat your employees too, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you had that experience at least.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely nice. But
Yeah.
um, well, maybe we'll wrap it up on that note. That was a nice positive one. Um, unless you have anything else that you wanted to add, I mean, we could summarize, um, if you'd like to, but yeah.
No, I think that's fine. We've talked about a lot, and I mean, again, I thank you for inviting me on. I hope some of my experiences or stories could help somebody who watches this, or at least get them
And
thinking
well, take
in
care.
a
Best of
different
luck with the
way.
process, and